fui para Lisboa viver com 11 anos sozinho. Muito, muito difícil. Chorava todos os dias. Viver sozinho, sem os pais, sem ter o amor dos irmãos. Isso sim é passar dificuldade.
Imagine that. 11 years old. Not 12, not 15. 11. With a small bag, a one-way ticket, and a city that didn't know your name. 500 miles from everything you loved. No parents at breakfast, no siblings to fight with at night, no familiar voice telling you everything was going to be okay. Just a dormitory bed, a room full of strangers, and a silence that got heavier every single night. And somewhere in that silence, a question started forming. One that didn't have an easy answer. Was this worth it? Was leaving everything behind really worth this? Nobody knew yet, not even him. But this isn't just a story about a boy who left home too early. Those stories exist everywhere. This one is different because most people who leave everything behind do it with a plan, with a guarantee, with a safety net. He had none of that. He had a dream and a ticket, and the kind of courage that only exists before you fully understand what you're risking. Because here's what nobody tells you about chasing something at 11 years old. You're not old enough to understand sacrifice. You're just old enough to feel the weight of it. And that weight gets heavier before it gets lighter. So the question isn't why he almost gave up. The question is, what made him stay? And the answer is not what most people think. Before anyone knew his name, he was just a kid from a small island in the middle of the Atlantic. Madeira. Not a city, not a place with big stadiums or professional scouts walking the streets. Just an island. Small, warm, far from everything. He was born into a family that didn't have much. His father worked as a kit man for a local club. His mother cleaned houses and cooked to keep the family fed. 4 children, one small home, and never quite enough of anything. But there was always football. On the streets, on the beach, in every empty space he could find. From the moment he could run, he had a ball at his feet. And it wasn't just talent, it was obsession. While other kids played and went home, he stayed, always the last one on the field, always asking for one more game, always pushing just a little further than everyone else. His childhood friends would say later that he cried when he lost, even in street games, even when it didn't matter, because to him, it always mattered. And word spread. First through the neighborhood, then through the local clubs, until one day, someone with the right connections made a phone call. And that phone call changed everything. Sporting, one of the biggest clubs in Portugal. They wanted to see him. And after 3 days of trials, they wanted to sign him. He was 11 years old, and the price of that dream was leaving the only world he had ever known. His mother said yes, because she knew what this meant for the family, for his future, for everything they had never been able to give him. So she packed his bag and said goodbye to her youngest son. And he got on a plane to Lisbon with a small suitcase and no idea what was waiting for him. Lisbon was nothing like Madeira. Bigger, louder, colder in ways that had nothing to do with the weather. The academy dormitory was full of boys who had been there longer, boys who knew the routines, who knew each other. And then there was him, the kid from the island, with the different accent, the different clothes, the different everything. They laughed at the way he talked, not once, not occasionally, every day. The Madeiran accent was thick and unmistakable. And in Lisbon, it made him stand out in the worst possible way. So he stopped talking as much, started keeping to himself, learned that silence was safer than words. And at night, when the dormitory went quiet and everyone else fell asleep, he lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about home, his mother's voice, his siblings, the streets he knew, the smell of the island, everything that was 500 miles away. And every morning, he woke up and it was still there. That weight, training helped. When he was on the field or the noise in his head went quiet, but training ended. And then came the evenings, the long, empty evenings, with nothing to fill them except the distance between where he was and where he wanted to be. He saw his family every 3 months. 3 months! For an 11-year-old boy, that is not a number. That is a lifetime. And the loneliness didn't get easier. It accumulated, day after day, week after week, until one night, it became something else entirely. Something he couldn't just sleep off or train away. Something that had a name. I want to go home. And then it happened. Not dramatically. Not in a single conversation, just quietly. The way the hardest decisions always arrive. In the second year, the club made a decision. He was too unhappy to perform, too homesick to focus. So they sent him back to Madeira, back to his mother, back to his island, back to everything he had left behind. And for a moment, it felt like relief. Because home felt like home again. The familiar streets, the familiar voices, the familiar smell of the island. Everything he had been missing for months was right there. And the question that had been building for 2 years finally had an answer. He could stay. Nobody would blame him. He was just a kid. The dream could wait or disappear, and life in Madeira would go on exactly as it always had. But something happened in those days at home. Something quiet. Something that didn't announce itself. He looked around at the streets he loved, at the life that would be his if he stayed. And somewhere in that looking, he understood something for the first time. That going back wasn't the same as going home. Home had already changed because he had already changed. And the boy who had left 11 months ago couldn't fit into the same space anymore. The dream was still there, uncomfortable, inconvenient, refusing to go quiet. And so he made the hardest choice an 11-year-old boy can make. He picked up his bag and went back to Lisbon. Not because it was easy, but because staying in Madeira meant giving up on the only thing that had ever made him feel like himself. And he wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. And the boy who got on that plane with a small suitcase and a decision that nobody asked him to make wasn't just any kid from a small island. He wasn't just another homesick boy in a dormitory in Lisbon. He wasn't just another dream that almost didn't happen. That boy was Cristiano Ronaldo. And the moment he stepped back onto that field, something had shifted. Not his talent, his relationship with the pain, because he had been given the chance to quit. A real chance. With a legitimate reason. A plane ticket home. A family waiting. And he had chosen to come back anyway. And that choice changed everything about how he competed. He stopped waiting for it to get easier. He started training before anyone else arrived, staying after everyone left, sneaking out of the dormitory at night to lift weights in the gym. When the coaches found out and locked the gym, he used buckets of water to do squats in the shower. When they took the buckets, he strapped weights to his ankles and ran in the street. Because the boy who had almost gone home was now allergic to standing still. Coaches started noticing, not just his talent, his obsession. At 15, he turned to his teammates during training and said something nobody forgot. "I'll be the best player in the world one day." They laughed. He didn't. By 16, he was training with Sporting's first team. By 17, he was playing professionally. By 18, in a preseason friendly against one of the biggest clubs in the world, he put on a performance so extraordinary that the opposing players went to their manager at halftime and told him he had to sign that kid. 3 days later, he was a Manchester United player, and from there, the world couldn't look away. Years later, he went back to Madeira, not as the homesick kid who cried every night, not as the boy with the different accent nobody wanted to hear, but as someone the entire island had been watching for decades. And when he arrived, the streets felt different. Not smaller, just his. In a way they never were when he was 11, because you can't truly belong to a place until you've chosen it over everything else. And he had, not once, every single day he stayed in Lisbon instead of coming home. Every morning he woke up in that dormitory and chose the dream over the comfort. That was his island. That was his family, not just the place he was born, but the reason he kept going when everything said stop. And his mother, the woman who packed his bag and said goodbye to her youngest son at the airport, watched all of it. Every goal, every trophy, every moment the world stopped to watch her son do something nobody had ever seen before. From a distance at first, then from the front row, because the boy who once needed her voice to feel okay had become the voice that made millions of people feel like they could keep going. That plane ticket to Lisbon was the most expensive thing his family ever bought. Not in money, in everything else. In the nights his mother cried after saying goodbye. In the birthdays he wasn't there for. In the years that passed before the distance stopped feeling like distance. And none of it came with a guarantee. No one told him it would work out. No one promised the sacrifice would be worth it. He just believed. At 11 years old, with no proof, with no map, with nothing but a dream that refused to go quiet, even on the nights when everything else did. And here's what that means for the rest of us. The hardest part of chasing something real isn't the work. It's the moment when you're given a legitimate reason to stop. When the door home is open, when no one would blame you, when staying costs more than leaving. That's the moment that decides everything, not the talent, not the opportunity, the choice. And a boy from Madeira made that choice before he was even old enough to fully understand it. So if you're standing at that door right now, with every reason to walk through it, remember this: sometimes the place that feels most like giving up is the exact place where everything begins.